Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Tokyo on Fire. Today is September 1st, 2016. Today I'm joined by eminent scholar and Japan hand, Glen Fukushima. Glen is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C. He's frequently in Tokyo, and you see him around at all sorts of venues and events. Glen, welcome.
Thanks very much. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. I see you all over town. You're sitting on boards of all of the right organizations. Dan Slater has the Delphi Network. I understand you're a board member there. That's a great organization. You're also on the board for the U.S.-Japan Council.
Right.
You're involved in a lot of things.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep out of trouble.
You've been involved in Japan-U.S. relations for a long time. Ever since I've been in Japan, you've been here, and you've been
making me sound old.
Well, you've been doing it a long time. You've been at the American Chamber of Commerce of Japan.
Right.
All over the place and at a very high level.
Well, you know, I like diversity. I like to be active, and I'm really interested in people. And so I get involved in a lot of organizations, and I really enjoy it. I'm now, spending my time between Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and Tokyo. And every place I go, I just find interesting people, interesting issues.
Well, you're an interesting person, too, and people are captivated and follow you. People like me, people who have been involved in the U.S.-Japan relations for a long time. I mean, you're one of the pinnacles of... I mean, there are a lot of people who have been thinking and writing books, Ezra Vogel, a lot of people that we know and we learned from. That generation is kind of gone, and there are really just a few people that are really kind of leading that charge. And you're in Washington, D.C. now. You're greatly involved in the Clinton campaign, moving that ball forward. She's got an incredible foreign policy team. I think that's one of the strengths that she has. Tell us about what you're doing with her campaign.
Sure. Well, I first met Hillary Clinton in 1992 in December at the Little Rock Economic Summit, which was held a month after Bill Clinton was elected president. And at that time, 92 campaign, you remember, it was the economy stupid. So right after he was elected, he had a conference in Little Rock, Arkansas, in which he invited about 200 people to talk about the economic issues facing the Clinton administration. So I was with AT&T at the time, having just left USTR after 5 years in Washington, and based in Japan with AT&T. So I was invited, and they gave me 12 minutes to talk about economic developments in East Asia since the end of World War II. And as a result, Ron Brown offered me a job to be the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for International Economic Policy, which I turned down, but I was still interested in what the Clinton administration was doing with Asia in particular. So I followed her career since then, and I've been a big admirer and supporter of hers. So when she ran in 2008, I supported her. And then this time around, I have been a supporter. I've gone to a number of events supporting her and was with her at a dinner with about 30 people in Washington just about a month ago.
Right. I see on Facebook, I'm following you on Facebook, you're always posting these terrific photos, and you're there with Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton, and you're really engaged at
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, I think there was an event in Las Vegas. It was actually Asian American political activists invited representatives from 4 parties, Democratic Party, Republican Party, Green Party, and Libertarian Party. And so Bill Clinton came to represent Hillary, so I had a chance to see him there as well. So, so I'm very encouraged by the Clinton campaign.
November 8th is not very far away.
Yeah, about 10 weeks, maybe.
And there's still a lot of fireworks to be had?
Well, there's going to be presidential debates on TV, and so since Donald Trump makes it a point to be unpredictable, I'm sure we'll see some unpredicted happenings.
What do you predict is going to happen between now and then? I mean, he is on a roll. And it seems like he's really going for the populist sentiment in the United States, and he's scoring big points. He's not scoring very many points internationally, though.
Well, I think there is a kind of a bifurcation between the domestic situation in the U.S. and abroad, as you say, but also even within the United States. I think it's really interesting that if you look at like the New York Times, they're now predicting about a 90% to 10% probability of Hillary Clinton winning. I think the Real Clear Politics polls that look at 7 major polls, 6 of them have Hillary leading, 1 has Trump leading. But the overall difference, I think, is 47.6 versus 41.6. So it's Clinton has I think a 5-point advantage. So I think the polls show Clinton leading. But it's true that Donald Trump is kind of tapping into some of the populist anger, fear, frustration about jobs and about dysfunctional Washington and so forth. So, yeah, it's. But the other factor too is that, as you know, many kind of established Republicans are not supporting Trump. Hank Paulson, former Secretary of Treasury, Richard Armitage, former Deputy Secretary of State, Bob Zelig, former U.S. Trade Representative, a whole slew, I think Michael Hayden, former head of the CIA, a lot of people have come out with statements either saying they can't support Trump or that they're supporting Clinton. Susan Collins, the Republican senator from Maine, had a big op-ed piece in the Washington Post saying that she cannot support Trump. And Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay, now CEO of Hewlett-Packard, who used to, ran for governor of California and lost as a Republican, also came out in support of Hillary. So I think Hillary's picking up a lot of stranded mainstream Republicans. But I think Trump is getting a lot of people who are dissatisfied with the status quo and not necessarily even Republicans, but they want someone to kind of represent their anger and frustration and desire for change.
Yeah, she had a terrific foreign policy speech just recently that I think really boosted her numbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, she was Secretary of State,
Yeah,
and she has very good foreign policy advisors. So certainly on foreign policy, she is more informed than Donald Trump. But Donald Trump has, all these kind of interesting ideas, and so they attract a lot of attention. I remember seeing him on a TV program. Chris Matthews had him on a TV program in which Chris Matthews said, "So are you considering using nuclear weapons in Europe?" And Trump says, "I don't take anything off the table. I don't take anything off the table." That kind of surprised a lot of people. And then when someone asked him about U.S. commitments to NATO, he said, "Well, we'll have to see whether these NATO countries are, paying their fair share." Mm-hmm. And then, on Japan and South Korea, he has said that they need to pay up more for the defense. And he also has hinted that he wouldn't care that much if they were to eventually have nuclear weapons. And so, he's saying a lot of interesting things.
Interesting things. It does reveal a little bit of not so much depth in knowledge in U.S.-Japan relations or the role that Japan plays in actually paying for those mm-hmm. U.S. forces being here.
Right.
But one of the issues that I think has triggered a lot of attention here in Tokyo is TPP.
Sure.
And the kind of swaying back and forth,
right.
especially on
mm-hmm.
in the Clinton campaign,
yep.
Going for TPP or pulling back from TPP.
Right.
And you're basically a trade guy, right?
Well, I spent 5 years at USTR, so I do follow trade issues pretty carefully. And mm-hmm. on TPP, it's really interesting because there are a lot of things that were not predicted for this year's election. Obviously, one is the rise of Donald Trump. Another is the rise of Bernie Sanders. But the third issue, I think, which really was not predicted last year, was how important trade has become as an issue. And I think probably summer of last year, for instance, I think Donald Trump announced in June that he's running. Hillary Clinton announced in April that she's running. Around that time, trade really wasn't such a hot issue. But as time went on, especially with Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump criticizing NAFTA and also TPP, it became one of the major issues. Mm-hmm. And it's true. Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, while the TPP negotiations were taking place before it came to a conclusion in Atlanta last year in October, she did say that she hoped that TPP would be the gold standard of trade agreements. But after the agreement was reached and a lot of criticism was heard not only by the two candidates, but also by labor unions, NGOs, NPOs, some members of Congress, some academics, and Hillary Clinton took a look at the agreement. She said she can't agree because of three standards or three criteria. She said for her to support TPP, she's asking, does it create jobs? Does it increase wages? And does it enhance American national security? And as the agreement stands now, she finds that it doesn't meet those standards. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that during the lame duck session, President Obama will try his very best to get the TPP ratified, because obviously it's a major part of the Asia pivot or Asia rebalance that he announced in the first term. So I think he will very much want to get it ratified. Whether it's possible or not clear yet.
Not much time
and if it doesn't get through in the lame duck session, then the new administration will have to deal with it.
Right, and which administration that'll be?
Well, if it's the Trump administration, he's had some mixed messages. On the one hand, he says that trade agreements like these are useless and he would get rid of them. On the other hand, sometimes he says that he would totally renegotiate. So it may be that if it's Trump administration, he will try to totally renegotiate, but then probably that means that the other 11 countries will not go along. So in essence, it will die.
Right.
If it's a Clinton administration, I think that she and vice presidential candidate Tim Kaine, both of them, I think in principle, believe that trade agreements can be constructive and helpful. but the TPP as it stands now doesn't meet those standards. So if it's a Clinton administration, I think there may be an attempt to try to modify and revise the agreement so that it does meet those three standards.
Mm-hmm. What's your view on it? I mean, the Japanese were first totally against it, and then they've come back to center, and actually they're in support of TPP now. One of the main beneficiaries of TPP is obviously Japan, but probably the primary beneficiary of a successfully implemented TPP is the United States.
Well, I think the U.S. and Japan will both benefit. I think the agreement itself will benefit all 12 of the countries. Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that I think there are 6 or 7 of the 12 that require the legislatures of those countries to ratify. So in Japan, probably in the Diet session between late September and October, most likely the TPP will be ratified. And I think the discussion among the 12 countries has been that to the extent that these countries that have a requirement for the legislatures to approve, to the extent that they're able to get the TPP legislation approved, that will help the U.S. administration persuade the U.S. Congress to go along and ratify. So I think the hope in Japan is that this ratification will take place before the U.S. election.
On November 8th? Mm-hmm.
No.
That's a very aggressive schedule.
Well, but I think in September, October, the plan is that it will get through the Japanese Diet and perhaps some of the other legislatures, and the U.S. administration can use that as one argument to try to persuade members of Congress to go along to ratify during the lame duck session between November 8th and the end of the year.
Before we wrap up this session, Glenn, you spend about half of your time in Tokyo, half of your time in D.C. or New York.
Not quite.
Not
quite?
About
60% D.C., 15% San Francisco, 25% Tokyo.
You're a lucky guy.
Yeah, I like all 3 cities.
Yeah. What's kind of the hot items when you come to Tokyo? What are the things that people are really curious about? What do you, from your perspective, see as the issues that are kind of evolving that people need to be watching?
Actually, I think you've hit on the 2 major issues right now, the U.S. election and number 2, TPP. Those are the 2 issues that a lot of people ask me about in Japan.
You heard it first here from Glen Fukushima. Please stay tuned. We're going to follow up on these issues and report to you as they develop. Thank you.